It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when I sat at my dining table, sorting old bills and insurance papers I had paid for years. My hands moved out of habit, but my mind was tired. Family was coming over, and I told myself it would just be another normal gathering. I did not know that in a few minutes my mother would announce that my sister got the insurance money and I would be treated like I did not exist. If you're watching this, please like the video, subscribe, and tell me where you are watching from today below, please. The moment it happened was so ordinary that I almost missed the weight of it. We were all gathered in the living room, cousins, nieces, nephews, everyone picking at snacks and making small talk about the weather and weekend plans. It felt like one of those regular family gatherings where people pretend everything is fine even when it's not. I was sitting quietly on the couch, folding a napkin in my lap, the way older women often do when they're trying not to think too much. And then, out of nowhere, my mother spoke as casually as someone reading a grocery list. She said the insurance money had already been deposited into my sister's account, just like that. No warning, no explanation, no mention of me. I didn't react at first because I thought I heard her wrong. My mother never spoke about money openly, especially money that involved both of her daughters. She acted like finances were some private secret only she and my sister understood. But when the room went quiet for a second, I realized everyone else had heard it clearly. A few people even nodded, like they already knew. That hit me harder than anything, realizing conversations had been happening behind my back, decisions made without me, and choices taken as if I didn't matter. My daughter offered to refill my drink, but by then I couldn't focus on anything except those words echoing in my head. Your sister already got it. I blinked several times, trying to piece together what she meant. Insurance money? What insurance money? I had never received a call, a letter, or a single update about any claim being filed. It didn't even make sense because I was the one who handled those papers. I was the one who kept every receipt, every payment slip, every renewal notice. I was the one who paid the premiums for almost 2 decades. I knew those numbers by heart because I made the sacrifices for them. And now, with one careless statement, my mother had announced that everything I worked for had been handed to someone else, not even shared, not even discussed, simply given away like spare change. My sister sat across the room, legs crossed, holding her wine glass like she was celebrating a victory. She smiled in that smug way only she could, tilting her head slightly as if she expected applause for something. The confidence on her face, the pride, the satisfaction, it all told me she had known about this for a long time, maybe weeks, maybe months, maybe even before I knew anything had happened. To her, it wasn't a shock at all. It was a reward, a prize she believed she deserved more than I ever would. And the worst part was how natural she looked accepting something that wasn't hers. People around us continued chatting, unaware of the storm building inside me. They laughed, clinked glasses, and talked about future plans. But I couldn't hear any of it. I could only hear the pounding of my heart and the steady reminder that I had been erased from a process I had funded entirely. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and pulled out something I worked years to protect. Insurance was supposed to be a safety net for the family property, something both my sister and I agreed would be shared equally when the time came. I remembered the promises we made years ago, promises rooted in trust. And now, seeing my sister's satisfied expression, I knew those promises had meant nothing to her. As people began congratulating her, clueless, blind, easily impressed, I sat still, my hands tightening around the edge of my napkin. My sister accepted the praise with no guilt, no shame, no acknowledgement that someone else had carried the financial weight for years. She smiled like she had accomplished something on her own. My mother even patted her back as if she had overcome hardship. Meanwhile, the person who paid every premium, filled every form, and handled every detail was treated like a background extra in her own financial story. The silence inside me grew heavier because it wasn't just about money. It was about betrayal, dismissal, and the slow erasing of my existence within my own family. They didn't even try to hide it. It was done openly, boldly, confidently. Everyone celebrated except the one person who had funded every cent. And the more I sat there, the clearer one truth became. This wasn't a simple oversight. It wasn't an innocent mistake. It wasn't a small misunderstanding. This was intentional. This was planned. This was the moment they openly revealed what they truly thought of me, that I was someone who didn't need to know, someone who didn't deserve a share, someone who didn't deserve respect. They expected me to accept it quietly, like I always had. They expected me to smile politely and pretend it didn't matter. They expected me to sit still while they took what was mine. But they didn't know the truth yet. They didn't know the storm that was coming. Because I wasn't shocked about losing the money. I was shocked because I never filed a claim, and that meant someone had filed it in my name. When the shock settled just enough for me to breathe again, I finally spoke. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't create a scene. I simply asked the most basic question any person would ask after hearing that their money had been handed to someone else. Why wasn't I told? And the moment those words left my mouth, the whole room shifted. People stopped chewing. A few cousins glanced over. My mother turned toward me slowly, as if my question was rude or inconvenient. She didn't hesitate. She didn't soften her tone. She answered me like she was scolding a child who dared to talk back. She said I didn't need it. She said my sister struggled more. She said I should be understanding. Her words hit me like cold water, not because of what she said, but how easily she said it. She didn't blink. She didn't pause. She didn't think about how disrespectful it sounded. She had already made the decision long ago. I wasn't important. My needs didn't matter. My years of paying into the policy meant nothing. My efforts, sacrifices, and responsibilities were invisible to her. In her eyes, I was someone who existed to give, not receive. My sister, meanwhile, lifted her wine glass and took a slow sip, watching me the entire time. She had a little smirk on her face, the kind a person wears when they think they've outsmarted everyone. Her posture relaxed, like this moment proved her superiority. She didn't look sorry. She didn't look embarrassed. She looked pleased, the kind of pleased that comes from getting away with something. She angled her shoulder toward my mother, almost like she was reminding everyone she was the favorite child, the chosen one, the one who always got what she wanted. The room felt tight around me, like the air had thickened. I could feel everyone watching, but nobody stepped in. Nobody questioned my mother. Nobody questioned my sister. They all acted like this was normal, like I should smile and accept being shut out of something I paid for, like fairness didn't apply to me. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't new. This was years of behavior, years of dismissal, years of minimizing my role in the family. They expected me to do what I always did, stay quiet. I kept my eyes on my mother, hoping for even a hint of guilt or explanation. But all I saw was irritation, the kind people show when they think you're being difficult. She didn't ask how I felt. She didn't care about the work I put into paying those premiums for nearly 2 decades. She didn't acknowledge my contributions. She simply repeated that I didn't need the money, as if she had the right to decide that, as if she had any idea what I needed, as if a lifetime of my choices belonged to her to redistribute. My sister leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs with exaggerated confidence. She acted like she deserved the payout more because she had struggled in life. But her struggles came from choices she made, irresponsible choices, expensive mistakes, and a pattern of relying on others. Meanwhile, my struggles had been real, raising children, working long hours, saving every cent I could. I had made sacrifices she never even attempted. Yet here she sat, rewarded for ignoring responsibility while I was punished for carrying it. What stung most was the expectation, They both fully expected me to accept humiliation silently. They were waiting for me to nod and move on. They wanted me to pretend their decision was normal. They wanted me to minimize myself again. My mother's expression said she believed she had the final word. My sister's smirk said she believed she had won. I sat there, still and steady, realizing how easy it was for them to push me aside because I had allowed it for years. Not because I was weak, but because I valued peace, I valued family, I valued harmony. And they used those values against me every chance they got. They turned my silence into weakness. They mistook my patience for permission. But something shifted inside me in that moment. Something quiet but firm. I could feel my spine straighten, my breath deepen, my mind sharpen. I wasn't angry in a loud way. I wasn't explosive. My anger settled into something colder, something clearer. It was the kind of anger that comes when you see the truth plainly for the first time, even if it breaks your heart. They didn't make a mistake. They didn't overlook me. They didn't forget to tell me. They made a decision, a conscious decision to take something that was mine and hand it to the person they believed deserved more, because they never respected my role, my work, or my worth. They assumed I would swallow this the same way I swallowed every past hurt. But for the first time in my life, I felt a different kind of stillness inside me. Not the stillness of silence, the stillness of someone preparing to speak the truth. And none of them were ready for what that truth would expose. The insurance policy didn't appear out of thin air. It wasn't some family treasure handed down to us. It wasn't something my sister ever cared about. It started with me, my planning, my savings, my years of worry about what would happen to our family property when we got older. 17 years ago, I sat at my kitchen table with a pen in my hand and a stack of papers in front of me. I remember the feeling clearly. I wanted to protect what little we had. I wanted to make sure no one in the family would struggle if something unexpected happened. Back then, I believed in unity. I believed in fairness. I believed blood meant loyalty. The insurance agent explained everything in simple terms: the premiums, the benefits, the coverage. It wasn't a cheap plan. It wasn't a short commitment. It was something that required discipline month after month. But I didn't hesitate. I signed my name without blinking because I wanted to secure a future for all of us, me, my mother, my sister, and the property we shared responsibility for. I wanted to make sure no one would be forced to sell, panic, or break down in a crisis. It was meant to be a safety net for the family. That was the whole point. And I was the one who funded it. Every month, without fail, I paid that premium. Even when money was tight. Even when life was heavy. Even when I had to skip small treats or pick up extra work. I never missed a payment. Not once. The receipt sat neatly in my folder, proof of every sacrifice I made. My sister never asked about them. My mother never mentioned them. They were happy letting me handle it, happy letting me shoulder the weight, happy treating it like my responsibility. But they had no problem treating the payout like theirs. Back then, when we first agreed to take the policy, they promised something. They promised that when the time came, whenever it came, we would split everything equally. They said it casually, but confidently, like we were all on the same page. And because I still had faith in them, I believed it. I believed they understood what the policy meant. I believed they appreciated the work behind it. I believed they respected my role. For years, I didn't question anything. I handled renewals. I handled paperwork. I handled mail. I kept the documents safe in my drawer. I updated my information when I moved. I made sure everything was up to date. My sister never once asked about the policy. She never offered to help. She never showed interest in learning how it worked. She was busy with her own life, her own choices, her own storms, and I didn't resent her. I assumed she trusted me to handle things. I didn't realize she trusted me only when it meant I was doing the work. She never planned to stand by me when it was time for fairness. Looking back, I see the pattern clearly. If there was something hard, something long-term, something requiring patience or discipline, It somehow became my job. My mother praised me for being responsible, but deep down, I think she liked it because it made her life easier. My sister, on the other hand, always floated above responsibilities, always had someone cleaning up after her, always found a way to look like the victim needing extra help. She had mastered the art of appearing helpless when it benefited her, and confident when it benefited her even more. But the insurance policy wasn't a small favor. It wasn't a 2-week task. It was 17 years of commitment, 17 years of trusting that one day the agreement we all made would be honored. And even though I knew I was the only one doing the work, I still believed we were equals in this. I held on to that belief because the idea of family meant something to me. Then the payout happened, without me knowing, without me being told, without even a courtesy call. My sister received the money that my bank account had fed for almost 2 decades. The money I worked for, the money I budgeted for, the money I sacrificed real things for. She accepted it like she had earned it. She acted like she deserved it. My mother supported her like I didn't exist. They didn't hesitate. They didn't ask questions. They didn't even give me the dignity of a conversation. And that was what cut the deepest. Not the money, but the betrayal. They took something I built from the ground up, something meant to protect all of us, something I carried alone for years. They took it and handed it to the one person who never lifted a finger for it. And they truly believed I wouldn't question it. They believed I would stay quiet, like always. They believed I would accept being erased. But they didn't know the truth sitting in my drawer. They didn't know the owner of the policy. They didn't know the signature that mattered. They didn't know the storm they were about to walk into. Looking back now, the signs were there long before the insurance money was ever mentioned. I can see that clearly, but at the time, I brushed them aside because that's what mothers do. We give excuses to protect the people we love. We soften the truth so it doesn't hurt as much. We convince ourselves that family wouldn't purposely push us out. But slowly, quietly, and almost gently at first, they did. Piece by piece, they pushed me away from the very family decisions I had helped build. It started with the meetings. For years, whenever there were discussions about the family property or future plans, I was always the one who kept track of everything: documents, calendars, numbers. But slowly, the invites stopped coming. The group messages no longer included my name. I would find out about important decisions days or even weeks after they happened. When I asked why I wasn't told, my mother would shrug and say it slipped her mind. My sister would say the meeting was nothing important. But every time I was left out, something important did change. At first, I convinced myself it was an accident. Families get busy, people forget, schedules shift. But the forgetting kept happening, again and again. Each meeting they held without me chipped away at my place in the family, like I was slowly being erased from the circle. Then my sister began handling paperwork without telling me. She started collecting files, taking copies of documents, and having conversations with lawyers and banks. Whenever I asked about it, she waved me off like the details were too complicated for me to understand. My mother encouraged it, praising her for stepping up and taking charge. But I had been taking charge for decades. I had handled things quietly and responsibly because someone had to. Seeing them act like she suddenly became the responsible one felt like watching someone else rewrite history in front of me. There were moments when I would open the shared folder, where we kept documents about the property, insurance, wills, repairs, and I noticed files missing. At first, I thought maybe I misplaced them. I searched the house, old drawers, file boxes, but they were simply gone, removed, taken. When I questioned my mother about it, she looked annoyed instead of concerned. She said my sister probably has them, like it was normal for her to take control of everything without informing me. But it wasn't normal. It was deliberate. Even at family gatherings, the dynamic started shifting. My mother introduced my sister to relatives as the one who manages all our paperwork, while I sat there with years of proof sitting in my drawers at home. She made comments like, "Your sister knows how to handle these things," or "She's the one we trust with money." It was shocking how easily they dismissed my involvement, how quickly they minimized all the years I had worked to protect our family assets. These weren't random mistakes. These were careful steps in the same direction, toward pushing me out of the responsibilities I had carried for so long, toward clearing a path for my sister to claim more control, toward making it seem natural that she would be the one handling money decisions. Then came the tone, the subtle change in how they spoke to me. My mother started talking to me like I was fragile or confused. She acted like I didn't know how finances worked anymore. My sister acted like I asked too many questions. They made me feel like a burden for wanting transparency in something I had managed for years. And the saddest part? I accepted it quietly. I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe age was making me slower. Maybe I was asking too many questions. Maybe they really were just trying to help. But the truth was, they were slowly removing my voice from every important decision. They were shifting roles, and once my sister settled into the responsible one position, she took full advantage of it. There was one moment that still sticks with me. A bank representative called asking for clarification on a document. When I called my mother to ask what it was about, she sighed heavily and said, "Your sister already handled it." She didn't say it kindly. She said it like I had stepped out of my place, like I was interfering where I no longer belonged. That was the moment I realized something had changed. Not overnight, not suddenly, but slowly, carefully, like someone tightening a rope one loop at a time. I had gone from being included to being informed, to being left out, to being replaced, to being erased. I just hadn't seen the final step yet. They weren't just excluding me. They were preparing the perfect setup for what came next, taking something that was mine and acting like they had every right to do it. The truth finally revealed itself in the most unexpected way. It didn't come from my mother. It didn't come from my sister. It didn't come from any honest conversation. It came from a neighbor who had no idea she was exposing the biggest betrayal of my life. I was outside watering my plants when she casually mentioned she had seen my sister coming and going from the insurance office for months. She said it like she thought I already knew. She said it like it was normal. But I felt the ground shift beneath me. My sister had been visiting the insurance office for months? Why? What business did she have there without me? I tried to keep my face calm, but inside I felt something tighten sharply. My neighbor went on to explain that my sister had told the insurance staff she was the sole heir handling the family property matters. She even claimed my mother backed her up. My hands froze mid-air. Sole heir? Handling the property? What paperwork did she show them? What lies had she told? How long had this been happening? Suddenly, every missing document, every skipped meeting, every whisper made perfect sense. My mother supporting her didn't surprise me, not anymore. I had seen enough to know that she always tilted toward the child who demanded the most attention. But supporting this? Supporting a lie that cut me out of something I paid for? Supporting a claim that erased me legally, financially, and emotionally? That was something far deeper. That was betrayal layered over betrayal. But the truth didn't stop there. The neighbors said my sister even bragged that everything would be under her name soon, and that she was just doing what needed to be done. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a plan, a deliberate, quiet, well-coordinated plan to remove me from the insurance policy altogether. They wanted to make sure that when the payout came, I would not be seen as someone with rights, but as someone irrelevant. My stomach tightened in a way that felt almost physical. I walked back into my house slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. My mind raced. Why had nobody from the insurance company contacted me? Why had I not been notified? Why had I not received a single letter, email, or phone call? I had been the one paying every bill. I had been the official policy holder for nearly 2 decades. The silence made no sense unless someone had made sure I would never be contacted. Inside, I sat at the table and began piecing things together like a puzzle finally showing its picture. My sister had taken documents from the shared folder. She had visited the insurance office repeatedly. She had held meetings I wasn't invited to. She had built a reputation as the responsible one, while painting me as someone who didn't understand finances. My mother had supported that story at every step. They weren't just taking advantage of me, they were strategically removing me from the entire process so that when the payout came, I would have no idea it was even happening. And that was exactly what they achieved. The payout arrived in my sister's account. My mother proudly announced it like she was giving good news, and they both expected me to accept it like it was nothing more than an unfortunate oversight. But now I knew the truth. They had been planning this long before the check ever arrived. They had been laying the groundwork. They had been rehearsing their story. They had been building a world where I did not exist financially. What made it even worse was realizing how easily they had discarded me. I wasn't just excluded, I was erased. They counted on me being quiet. They counted on me not checking. They counted on me trusting them blindly. They counted on me being the same woman I had always been, patient, forgiving, understanding, and too tired to fight. But then another dark thought crossed my mind, one that made my chest tighten even more sharply. If my sister received the payout, and I never filed a claim, and the insurance company never reached out to me, then somebody had filed that claim using my identity. This wasn't just betrayal, this was fraud. This was deliberate deception. This was a crime committed with confidence because they believed I would never question it. They weren't just taking the money. They were rewriting legal documents. They were signing my name. They were making themselves the center of a process that belonged to me. I felt my heart beating harder as the pieces finally formed a complete, devastating picture. It wasn't just exclusion. It wasn't just greed. It wasn't just family selfishness. It was a secret plan, one they had crafted, nourished, and carried out while smiling in my face, and they had no idea that I now knew every part of it. After hearing what my neighbor said, something inside me went still, not weak, still, the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. I walked into my bedroom, closed the door, and stood there in the quiet. I knew exactly what I needed to do. For 17 years, I kept every document, every receipt, every letter connected to that insurance policy. I kept them not because I expected betrayal, but because I have always been the type of woman who saves important things. Women my age know the value of paper trails. We know the world doesn't always protect us unless we can prove our own truth. I went to my closet, moved aside the old coats hanging there, and reached for the safe tucked behind the shelf. My hands shook, not out of fear, but out of anger and clarity mixing together. I typed in the code I had memorized so long ago. When the door clicked open, I felt a wave of something rise in me. Strength, memory, justice, all of it. Inside the safe were the documents I needed. I took out the thick folder that held the original insurance policy, untouched, unmodified, exactly the way I stored it years ago. I placed it on the bed and opened it slowly, page by page, and with every page I turned, my heart pounded harder. There was my name, my address, my signature, my payments, my ownership. Everything was under my name. There was no co-owner, no shared authority, no legal way for anyone else to claim anything without my permission. The policy was mine. The rights were mine. The decision-making power was mine and mine alone. And the more I stared at the documents, the clearer one truth became. If my sister had received the payout, then someone had lied to the insurance company. Someone had forged something. Someone had stepped into a role legally assigned to me. I kept flipping through the pages, and then my stomach dropped like a stone. The last recorded signature on the file, my signature from the original application, was clean, firm, easy to recognize. But the signature my neighbor described from the claim, that wasn't here. That meant whatever signature they used to claim the money wasn't part of any official document I had signed. Meaning one thing, someone forged my name on a claim file, not just betrayal, not just greed, not just manipulation. A felony. I felt a cold shiver run through my arms. I wasn't imagining things anymore. I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't overthinking. This wasn't a small family dispute. This was a crime, a deliberate act carried out by people who thought I would never fight back. Then something else hit me, harder than the betrayal itself. If the insurance company processed the claim without contacting me, that meant the person who filed it must have given different contact details. My phone number wasn't used. My email wasn't used. My address wasn't used. Someone had replaced my rightful information with their own. And I already knew who. My mother, my sister, the two people who had been controlling the paperwork, the two people who had taken documents from the shared folder, the two people who had been visiting the insurance office behind my back, the two people who believed they could outsmart me simply because I was older, quieter, and more trusting. I sat there on the edge of my bed, holding the document in my hands, feeling a strange mix of heartbreak and power. It hurt deeply to know my own family would sign my name behind my back, but at the same time, I felt a fire build inside me, because the detail they overlooked was the biggest one of all. They forgot who legally owned everything. Me. They forgot whose signature mattered. Mine. They forgot who kept every paper, every receipt, every record locked away safely. Me. And they forgot that a woman who has been quiet her whole life can become very, very loud when someone steals from her. I placed the documents back into the folder, but this time I didn't put them back in the safe. I kept them on my nightstand, right beside my bed. I wanted them close. I wanted to be ready. Because now that I had the truth, I had the power. And I knew exactly what I needed to do next. They thought they were clever. They thought they had covered their tracks. They thought I would never question anything. But they had forgotten the most important detail of all. The policy wasn't theirs to touch. And the fraud trail they created, without knowing it, pointed straight back at them. Once I realized someone had forged my name, the fear I expected never came. Instead, something calm settled inside me. A quiet strength, the kind a woman earns only after decades of surviving life's hardest lessons. I sat there with the folder in my lap, the truth staring at me in black ink, and I understood one thing with absolute clarity. I could not handle this alone. Not because I was weak, not because I was scared, but because crimes, real crimes, needed real help. And I was done being the one who stayed silent. I was done letting people walk over me. I was done letting my own family treat me like I was too old to notice what they were doing. So I took a deep breath, reached for my phone, and made a call I had never imagined making. I called the insurance company's fraud department. My voice was steady, not shaky or emotional. I spoke like someone who knew the truth. I explained that I never filed a claim. I explained that money had been paid out without my knowledge. I explained that someone had forged my name. The woman on the other end asked me to confirm my identity, then asked me to hold. Those 30 seconds felt like a lifetime, but I didn't panic. I sat with the documents in my hands, ready to defend myself. When the woman came back, her tone was completely different. Suddenly respectful, suddenly serious, suddenly aware that what I had reported wasn't a small issue. It was fraud, plain and simple. She said they would begin an internal investigation immediately. She asked me to send photos of the documents I had, along with copies of my identification. I did it right away. She thanked me and said someone from their fraud team would contact me within 24 hours. But I didn't stop there. Next, I called my cousin Elena. She's the kind of woman who speaks softly, but fights like fire when the truth is on her side. She's also a lawyer, experienced, sharp, and not easily fooled. When she heard my voice, she instantly knew something was wrong. I told her everything, every detail, every small piece, every sign I had ignored, every lie I now understood. I could hear the shift in her tone the moment I mentioned the forged signature. She went from calm to alert instantly. She asked me to send her photos of the policy documents, and within minutes she called back sounding almost breathless. She said the same thing the fraud department hinted at. That signature isn't yours. She explained that forged signatures carry legal consequences, real consequences. She said my sister and mother hadn't just taken money, they had committed a crime that could carry serious penalties, not petty penalties, federal penalties. Elena asked for copies of my email exchanges with the insurance company. I told her there were none because I had never been contacted. That made things worse, much worse. She told me that if the insurance company processed a claim without contacting the policy owner, someone had changed the contact information during the filing process. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't clerical error. That was intent. That was sabotage. That was illegal. Hearing those words made my heart sink, not from fear, but from the weight of betrayal. My own mother, my own sister. They had used my name to steal money I worked for. They had replaced my contact information with theirs. They had built an entire scheme on the belief that I was too old, too trusting, too quiet to notice. Elena told me she needed a copy of the claim file. She said she could request it directly as my legal representative. I agreed without hesitation. Within an hour, she called back again, and her silence on the phone said everything. She finally spoke and said the claim file was a mess of lies. The signature didn't match any of my official signatures. The phone number listed belonged to my mother. The documents listed my sister as the authorized contact, and the address used for correspondence was neither mine nor the property address. It was my sister's apartment. It was a complete setup. Elena told me to stay calm and not confront anyone yet. She said the best thing to do was gather evidence quietly and let the truth hit them when they least expected it. She said the insurance company would freeze the payout while fraud was investigated. She also reminded me that forging a legal signature was a federal crime. After we hung up, I sat quietly for a moment. Not sad, not broken, just steady. Because I had support now. I had a plan. I had the truth. And for the first time in this whole ordeal, I felt like the ground beneath me was solid. That evening, I placed the folder of documents on my table and stared at it. I realized something important. They thought I was alone. They thought I was powerless. They thought age made me blind. But I had allies. I had evidence. And I had the truth. And I was ready. When the day of the family gathering came again, I walked in with a different kind of calm. Not the quiet, shrinking calm they were used to. Not the calm of someone trying to keep peace. This was a steady, grounded calm. The calm of someone who finally knows the truth and has the papers to prove it. I wasn't angry. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't confused. I was ready. I carried my folder inside my handbag, not to wave around, not to threaten, but because I finally understood that the truth needed to be spoken in a room where lies had lived too long. Everyone was already gathered when I walked in, my mother, my sister, some cousins, and a few extended relatives. They were laughing loudly, drinking, chatting like everything in the world was perfect. My sister stood at the center of the room like she owned it, wearing confidence like it was jewelry. My mother hovered close to her, smiling with that familiar look of pride she used to save only for her. People barely noticed me at first, just a few nods, a few soft greetings. They thought I was coming to accept what they had done. They thought the conversation was over. They thought the money issue was settled. They had no idea the storm about to crack open the room. I sat down quietly and waited. I didn't rush. I didn't interrupt. I let them talk. I let them laugh. I let them enjoy their moment of victory. because it was the last one they would have for a long time. Eventually, the room settled enough that voices lowered. That's when I placed my hands on my knees, straightened my back, and said one sentence that sliced through the air like a blade. "Mom, want to tell them who filed the claim?" The room didn't go quiet. It froze. The kind of freeze where even air stops moving. My mother looked at me with the same shock someone has when their name is called in a courtroom. Her face drained of color. Her mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. She wasn't prepared. She didn't expect the question. She certainly didn't expect it in front of an audience. My sister, who had been so smug seconds earlier, turned sharply toward me. She looked confused at first, like she genuinely didn't understand the words. But then something flickered in her eyes. Fear. A small, quick flicker, there and gone, but I saw it clearly. She forced a little laugh and said, "Filed what?" Her voice shook on the last word. It was the first crack in her mask. I didn't move. I didn't raise my voice. I simply reached into my bag and placed the folder gently on the table. The sound of it hitting the wood was louder than any shout. My mother flinched. My sister's eyes widened. A few cousins leaned forward, sensing something serious unfolding. I looked straight at my sister and said only the truth. She had been visiting the insurance office for months. She had taken documents without telling me. She had told the staff she was the sole heir. She had filed a claim in my name, and the signature on the claim was not mine. My sister's confusion turned into panic. Real panic. Her hands trembled as she asked the same question again, but this time her voice cracked. "Filed what?" Not because she didn't know, but because she did. She just didn't know how much I knew. I pulled out the copies of the claim documents Elena had printed. I didn't shove them in anyone's face. I just placed them there. The forged signature, the changed contact information, the phone number belonging to my mother, the address belonging to my sister, and the payment confirmation showing the money transferred into my sister's account. People in the room gasped, some whispered, some stared with wide eyes. Even the ones who always believed my mother's stories looked shaken. My sister reached for the papers with trembling fingers, scanned them, then looked at my mother with a silent plea. My mother couldn't look back. Her face collapsed with guilt, fear, and the sudden realization that the lie they thought was clean had been exposed in full. My cousin Elena walked in at that exact moment, as planned, and set another pile of papers on the table. Timelines, screenshots, phone logs, email trails, proof that the fraud department had flagged the claim as suspicious, proof that an investigation was underway, proof that they hadn't just hurt me, they had broken the law. My sister burst into tears, not gentle tears, not tears of regret, tears of fear. Her hand shook uncontrollably as she grabbed her wine glass, then set it down again because she couldn't even hold it steady. My mother tried to speak, but Elena shut her down calmly and professionally. She explained what forging a signature meant. She explained the penalties. She explained how insurance fraud was treated. She explained that the payout had already been frozen, and she explained that the investigation was no longer in family hands. It was in legal hands. Nobody defended them. Nobody spoke for them. Nobody protected them. The same people who cheered for my sister earlier now stared at her in silence. Judgment, shock, disbelief, all of it wrapped around her like cold air. My sister whispered, "I didn't know." But even her voice betrayed her. She did know. My mother did know. They just never expected the truth to show up in front of the whole family. For once, they understood what it felt like to be caught. And for the first time in years, the room wasn't cold toward me. It was cold toward them. Once the truth was out on the table, literally in the form of printed documents, everything in the room shifted. The people who had been laughing minutes earlier now sat frozen in their seats. My mother's face turned pale, almost gray. My sister looked stunned, her hand shaking so badly she had to hold the edge of the table to steady herself. And in the middle of that silence, my cousin Elena opened her folder and began speaking with a calm, steady voice that carried more weight than any shouting ever could. She started by explaining the timeline of the claim, the dates, the signatures, the calls, and the transactions. She pointed out the phone number listed on the fraud file, the one belonging to my mother. She pointed out the address listed for correspondence, my sister's apartment. She pointed out the forged signature and compared it to the legitimate one on the original policy. She laid it out in a way nobody could argue with, even if they tried. Everything was clear, undeniable, and damning. My mother tried to speak first. She said it must have been a mistake. She said the clerk at the insurance office must have copied something wrong. She said she didn't know how my phone number got listed. But Elena calmly pushed the printed phone logs across the table. They showed outgoing calls from my sister and incoming calls from the insurer, all to my mother's number. There was no clerk to blame. There was no mistake. There was a clear pattern of communication between the two of them, beginning months before the payout and ending the day the money hit my sister's account. My mother's excuses fell apart instantly. Then it was my sister's turn. She broke down crying, shaking her head, saying she didn't understand what she signed. She said she thought she was helping. She said she thought the money was meant for her because she needed it more. But those weren't explanations. They were attempts to soften the blow, and none of them erased the fact that she had signed a fraudulent claim under my name, received money that legally belonged to me, and deliberately removed me from every step of the process. Elena didn't raise her voice, but the words she spoke next made the entire room feel colder. She explained the legal penalties for insurance fraud, felony charges, fines, repayment, investigation by the insurer's legal team, and potential involvement of federal authorities. She explained how forging a signature is considered identity theft. She explained how changing contact information to block the rightful owner from receiving updates was intentional deception. My sister sobbed harder. My mother stared at the floor, unable to lift her head. The loudest people in the family gathering had suddenly gone silent. Someone whispered, "Is this really that serious?" Elena answered without hesitation, "Yes, and they will be held accountable." My sister looked at me then, her face streaked with tears. For a moment, I thought she might apologize. For the first time in years, she looked small in a way that matched the weight of what she had done. But the apology never came. Instead, she whispered, "I didn't think you'd check." That sentence hit harder than anything she had done. It told me everything I needed to know. They didn't believe I was capable of fighting back. They didn't believe I would defend myself. They didn't believe I mattered enough to question anything. Elena continued explaining the formal steps. The payout had been frozen. A fraud investigation had been opened. All accounts and claims linked to the policy were under review. A legal team would be contacting both my mother and my sister. They would likely have to return every dollar. And depending on the findings, the case could move to prosecution. My mother finally spoke again, voice trembling. She said we should keep this in the family, that airing it out would embarrass everyone. But Elena calmly reminded her that they were the ones who took it outside family boundaries the moment they filed a false claim. My mother's face hardened, but she didn't say another word. She knew it was true. Then the phone rang. It was the insurance fraud department requesting an in-person follow-up. Elena answered on speaker. Their tone was formal, serious, professional. They confirmed that the payout was frozen, that the claim file had been flagged, and that both my mother and sister would be required to attend interviews. The room stayed silent the entire time. When Elena hung up, nobody dared to breathe. The consequences were no longer a threat. They were real. My sister covered her face with both hands, crying into her palms. My mother finally looked up at me, and for once I saw something in her eyes that I had waited decades to see. Guilt. Heavy, undeniable guilt. But guilt wasn't the same as accountability. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't change. I didn't say a word to either of them. I didn't need to. The truth had already spoken for me. The documents, the signatures, the logs, they said everything I couldn't. And for the first time in years, people in the room looked at me with respect instead of dismissal. Before I left, Elena handed me the folder. She said quietly, "It's time you get back what's yours." And I walked out of that gathering with my head held high. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I had survived the kind of betrayal most people never fully recover from. After we left that gathering, I drove home slowly, letting the air hit my face through the open window. For the first time in a long while, the wind felt clean instead of heavy. I didn't rush. I didn't shake. I didn't replay the confrontation over and over in my head. I simply felt free. It was strange, feeling freedom in a life I had lived for decades, but that's what betrayal does. It traps you quietly. You don't realize how tight the walls have closed around you until someone tears them down. And that night, the truth tore down everything my mother and sister tried to build against me. When I walked inside my home, I placed the folder of documents on the kitchen counter. I looked at it for a long moment. That folder had been used to steal from me, then used to expose them, and now it sat there, safe, under my roof, exactly where it should have always been. I made a cup of tea, sat at the table, and finally let myself breathe in a way I hadn't in years. A long, steady breath that didn't carry fear or confusion, just relief. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from my mother and 5 messages from my sister. My sister's messages were long, dramatic, filled with excuses and desperate attempts to soften the consequences. She said she didn't mean to hurt me. She said she thought the money made more sense for her. She said she only did what she thought was fair. Not once did she say she was sorry. Not once did she mention the forged signature. Not once did she acknowledge the fraud. She just cried through texts and begged me not to let the insurance company ruin her life. My mother's messages were shorter but sharper. She said I was being harsh. She said I should fix this privately. She said the family would fall apart if I didn't back down. Not once did she talk about betrayal. Not once did she address the lies. She was worried about embarrassment, reputation, and her image as a mother, not about what she and my sister had done to me. For years, those kinds of messages would have worked. I would have felt guilty. I would have softened. I would have found a way to forgive even without an apology. I would have carried the weight alone again. But something inside me had changed. Betrayal doesn't just break a person, it sharpens them. It forces them to look at the people they've been protecting and see the truth instead of the fantasy. And once you see the truth clearly, you can't unsee it. Instead of replying, I muted both of their numbers. The insurance company contacted me 2 days later. The investigator assigned to the case explained everything clearly and professionally. They confirmed that the payout was officially reversed. They confirmed that my sister's account had been frozen. They confirmed that the money would be returned to the rightful owner, me. And they confirmed that my mother and sister would need to attend separate fraud interviews with additional review from their legal department. I thanked them calmly, not joyfully, not smugly, just calmly. When I hung up, I didn't celebrate. I didn't dance around the kitchen. I didn't boast to anyone. I simply walked to the living room, sat on my sofa, and felt a quiet, deep peace settle into my chest. Not revenge, not triumph, peace. A week later, the money arrived in my account. I stared at the deposit notice for a long time. It wasn't the money itself that made me emotional. It was the validation. It was the proof that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't being dramatic, that I wasn't imagining the betrayal. It was the world confirming what my heart already knew. I had been wronged, and I had every right to stand up for myself. I decided to use the money on myself for once. I renovated my kitchen. I replaced the old flooring. I planted new flowers in my yard. I booked a small trip for myself, not far, not expensive, just something peaceful. And every step I took toward rebuilding my space, my comfort, and my joy felt like reclaiming pieces of myself they had tried to take. My mother and sister now avoid me. They don't attend gatherings if I'm invited. They don't call unless they want to blame someone. They don't speak my name unless it comes with excuses or denial. And oddly enough, that has brought me more peace than any apology ever could. Because here is the truth I learned. Sometimes the quiet one in the family isn't weak. Sometimes the one who never complains is the one who sees everything. Sometimes the one they think they can push aside is the one who can bring the entire truth to light. People mistake silence for softness. They mistake patience for permission. They mistake kindness for weakness. But silence is not weakness. Silence is observation. Silence is preparation. Silence is strength waiting for the right moment. And when the moment comes, the truth speaks louder than any lie ever could. In the end, I didn't get revenge by yelling. I didn't get revenge by fighting. I didn't get revenge by hurting them. My revenge was peaceful. My revenge was truth. My revenge was living my life without fear and without them dragging me down. And the lesson I want every woman my age to hear is this. Sometimes the quiet one isn't weak. She's
Imply gathering evidence.